There's a moment right before a plane takes off when the world holds its breath, that humming pause. The silence that wraps around a cabin of strangers. Some close their eyes, some pray, some grip the armrest just a little tighter. It's in that moment we place our trust, not just in technology, not just in training, but in something unseen, faith. Faith that we will rise and safely return. But what happens when that faith is shattered midair? What happens when a routine flight turns into a fiery tragedy, raining questions instead of answers? What happens when 242 souls trust you with their lives and you break that trust at 36,000 feet? Let me tell you something, that is not just a crash, that is a warning wrapped in flames, and it's time we stop pretending like everything is okay in the sky. This is not just a headline, not just another breaking news segment to scroll past. This is the scream of a mother who lost her child, the silence of a father who came to the airport bouquet in hand but no one arrived, the last message never read, the prayers unanswered. Air India flight AI 171 was not just a flight, it was a promise that was broken. And now I will say what so many are afraid to say, I will never fly the same again, not because flying is dangerous, but because denial is. Let's talk about what went wrong. Let's talk about the voices silenced before impact. Let's talk about the systems so used to covering the cracks, they no longer see them. Because this wasn't just an accident, it was a chain reaction of failures, mechanical, procedural, ethical. We've spent so long romanticizing the skies, we forgot that safety doesn't come from altitude, it comes from accountability. Where was it? Where was the urgency when warning signs blinked red months ago? Where was the courage to ground a flight, to postpone takeoff, to double check? Where was the voice that should have said, not today, not like this? Silence flew that plane too, and now I'm asking the questions no one wants to answer. Why did this happen? Who allowed it to happen? And how many more flights must fall before we rise in truth? This isn't just about Air India. This is about every airline that cuts corners, every aviation authority that rubber stamps inspections, every system that sacrifices lives for the illusion of punctuality. You know what's more important than being on time? Being alive. We can't bring back the lives lost on AI 171, but we can make sure they didn't die in vain. We can demand transparency. We can demand reform. We can demand that every future passenger is more than a seat number, more than cargo in the clouds. This is not anger. This is responsibility, and I won't stay silent. Because somewhere out there a little girl is watching the news, wondering if her mom is ever coming home. Somewhere out there a man is texting a phone that will never light up again. And somewhere out there someone is still saying, I don't understand how this could have happened. To them I say, you're not alone. And your grief is not a burden, it's a beacon that says, we must do better, we will do better, and we will never forget. Because I will never fly without remembering this moment, this flight, these lives, this truth, and neither should you. I want you to pause. Just for a moment, close your eyes if you need to and imagine the sound of your child laughing, the weight of your mother's hand resting softly on your shoulder, the smile of your partner across the dinner table. Now, imagine all of that gone in one blink, in one roar of an engine, in one moment that no one saw coming. That's what happened. That's what the world witnessed. And that's what shook me to my core when I first heard the news. This is not just a headline. This is not just another tragedy scrolling through your feed. This is a wake-up call. This is a warning. And this is a story of pain, of loss, and of truth that no one is ready to talk about, but we must. On June 12, 2025, an Air India flight AI 171, took off from Ahmedabad Airport, a modern high-tech Boeing 7087 Dreamliner, the kind they say is too safe to fail. 242 souls on board, mothers, fathers, children, students, dreamers, and in less than a minute after liftoff, it was all gone. The plane fell from the sky. It didn't just crash, it disintegrated midair, tore through the hostel building of BJ Medical College, and left behind nothing but screams, silence, and smoke. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Planes crash all the time, Oprah. Accidents happen. Yes, they do. But let me ask you something. What if it was your child in seat 24A? What if it was your sister, your father, your best friend, your baby boy buckled in for his first trip abroad? You see, it only becomes real when it touches your doorstep. But that's the thing, it already has, whether we realize it or not, because this isn't just about a plane crash. It's about what we trust. It's about the systems we rely on without question. It's about what's been ignored, and it's about who we failed to protect. I remember sitting by my window the night I heard the story. Rain was pouring down. I had my tea in hand, and as I read through each survivor account, wait, let me correct that. There was only one survivor out of 242 people, just one. His name is Vishwash, a young man with British nationality, saved by what some call fate, others a miracle. But you know what struck me? It wasn't the fact that he survived. It was what he said after regaining consciousness. He said, "I heard the plane tearing apart like paper, and then I woke up and there was nothing, no people, no sound, just nothing." What kind of world do we live in where nothing can be done to prevent this nothing? What happened to human accountability? What happened to real safety checks? Why is it that only after people die do we look for answers? Let me tell you something from my soul. I have spent decades talking to people who've lost loved ones, car crashes, plane crashes, suicides, illness. There's one thing that breaks them more than the loss, not knowing why, not knowing what could have been done differently. The story of Flight AI 171 is not just a story of aviation failure. It's a story of systemic silence, a story of delayed action, of corporate greed hiding behind polished PR statements, of families left shattered with no closure, no bodies to bury, no final words to hear, no chance to say goodbye. And we must not look away, not this time, because if we let this pass, if we turn the page like we always do, if we scroll on to the next trending topic, then we're saying their lives didn't matter, their stories didn't matter, their screams never heard don't matter. But I won't do that, not on my watch. This crash, this tragedy, this heartbreak, it is a mirror, and we must all look into it, even if it hurts, even if it breaks us, because that's how change begins. Not in silence, not in denial, but in truth. I'm Oprah Winfrey, and I'm not just telling this story. I'm carrying it with every beat of my heart, because no mother should have to call her son's number and hear only a dead tone. No father should have to fly across oceans to collect ashes instead of hugs. No friend should wait at an airport gate with flowers, only to be met with a wall of silence. This is more than a warning. It's a revolution of awareness, and this is just the beginning. The news cycle moved fast. By the next morning, other headlines had taken over. Political disputes, celebrity scandals, cricket scores. But for the families of the 241 people who died, time did not move. It froze right there in that one instant. 1338 IST, June 12, 2025. And I ask you, what happens to a life that gets reduced to a timestamp? I've seen this happen before in Haiti, in Sudan, in Chicago's South Side. But this shook something in me, because this wasn't a war zone. It wasn't a natural disaster. This was a plane taking off from home, from the airport where parents wave through glass panels, where lovers say, "I'll miss you," where children press their faces to the window dreaming of clouds. And now there's no window left, just a hole in the ground, just ash in the air, just grief hanging like smoke over a city that wasn't prepared for heartbreak. Ahmedabad, one of the fastest growing cities in India, suddenly became the epicenter of the world's sorrow. And I know this country. I've walked its villages. I've spoken with women who rise before the sun just to light a fire for tea. India is beauty and resilience wrapped in the hum of devotion. But on that day, the hum was broken, silenced. We live in an age of technology where planes are supposed to fly themselves, land themselves, talk to satellites, detect a feather in the engine from 30,000 feet. So what happened here? Was it the engine, the flaps, the weight, or was it, God forbid, neglect? Here's what nobody wants to talk about: profit over people. That's what happens when airlines stretch every last dollar, when overworked mechanics check off boxes instead of inspecting bolts, when software glitches get ignored because we'll fix it next time. There may not have been a terrorist on that flight, but the real terror is negligence. And let me speak clearly. Negligence is a choice. It is not an accident. Boeing, Air India, regulatory bodies, maintenance contractors, they all have a piece of the truth that they're too afraid to say aloud, because accountability means consequence, and consequence means compensation, public outrage, investigations, criminal charges. But you know what it also means? Healing for the ones left behind. And don't they deserve at least that? I remember when I sat down with a woman whose daughter was on a flight that went down in 2009. She told me, "Oprah, what hurts the most isn't that she died. It's that no one said sorry. No one called. No one came to my door." And I think of the families in India now, clutching photographs of children in graduation gowns, of wives in bridal dresses, of uncles in cricket jerseys.
Do you think they care about technical reports? No, they care about why. They care about truth. This isn't just about an airline. It's about how we as a global society have allowed death to become data. Black box recordings, flight path diagrams, newsroom animations showing dotted lines and altitude graphs. But where's the humanity? Where's the story of the girl in seat 33B who was texting her fiancé just seconds before impact? Where's the voice of the young doctor on board who had just been accepted to Harvard Medical School? Where's the little boy who carried a toy airplane in his hand and never got to see a real one land? I don't know about you, but I can't sleep through that. I've sat on too many panels, I've moderated too many conversations, and I've learned one thing: the world doesn't change through silence. It changes when someone stands up and says, enough. And that's why I'm here, not as a celebrity, not as a name behind a logo, but as a woman who's tired of seeing people die for no reason other than a system that values efficiency more than empathy. You see, the lesson here isn't just be careful when you fly. The lesson is demand better. Demand safety that's not just written in manuals but practiced on tarmacs. Demand voices that don't get silenced in boardrooms. Demand remembrance, not just for the dead but for the living who still walk around carrying the weight of unanswered questions. If a plane can fall from the sky in a matter of seconds, then the truth can rise just as fast, but only if we lift it. And I say this to every person listening, especially the ones who've lost someone. Your pain is real. Your voice matters. And I am with you. You are not alone.
There's something haunting about silence. Not the kind that soothes, not the kind you seek in meditation or prayer, but the kind that follows trauma. The silence of a mother sitting alone in a room once filled with laughter. The silence of a child who doesn't yet understand that daddy is not coming back. The silence of a country that witnessed 279 lives vanish in the blink of an eye and is still waiting for answers. That kind of silence is deafening. And in the days following the crash of Air India flight AI-171, that silence spread like a fog, chilling, numbing, and hard to pierce. We saw pictures, the burnt hostile walls of BJ Medical College, shoes half charred, lying on rubble, a woman's bracelet caught in twisted metal, a child's backpack covered in ash. These weren't just images, they were messages. They were proof of what was lost, proof that someone, somewhere, was waiting for those people to come home. But home never came. Instead, families were asked to identify loved ones by DNA samples. Instead, press conferences were held in cold rooms with colder words. We offer our condolences. We are investigating. We will provide updates when available. Let me ask you, have you ever lost someone? Not to illness, not to age, but suddenly, without warning. If you have, then you know there is nothing more brutal than having your heart ripped out, than being told to wait in line for information. This isn't just a case of mechanical failure, it's emotional failure, moral failure, failure of leadership. Because when 242 people board a plane, they don't just buy a ticket, they place their faith in a system built on trust. Trust that the engineers checked every bolt, trust that the maintenance crew followed every protocol, trust that the pilots weren't overworked or undertrained, trust that the airline prioritized lives over logistics. And when that trust breaks, it doesn't just shatter one family, it sends cracks through an entire nation. I want to talk about accountability, because we can't heal from wounds we don't name, and we can't forgive what no one is willing to admit. There are whispers now behind closed doors, whispers that the warning signs were there, that the aircraft had a history of minor system issues, that the flap system had been flagged, that a repair scheduled for next month never came. If that is true, then this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a preventable one. And there is nothing more painful than preventable loss. We owe the truth to those who died. We owe clarity to those who survived with broken bones and shattered dreams. We owe dignity to the families who are now holding funerals without coffins. And here's what I've learned after decades of listening to people's stories. Pain that is buried festers, but pain that is spoken begins to heal. So let's speak this pain. Let's call it out, not with hate, but with courage. Let's ask the hard questions. Who signed off on the final flight checklist? Who delayed the inspection? Who decided that this aircraft was fit for international flight? And let's go beyond blame. Let's change the culture that allows this to happen, because it's never just one mistake. It's layers, it's systems, it's habits that go unchecked. It's the voice of the junior mechanic who said something feels off and was told don't worry about it. It's the technician who was given 12 planes to inspect in a 10-hour shift. It's the safety officer who raised a flag and was met with silence. That's what killed those passengers. Not just gravity, not just machinery, but silence. And if we want to honor their memory, we cannot stay silent any longer. Let me be clear, this is not about fear-mongering. This is about awakening. It's about remembering that every single number on a manifest is a person, a story, a life. It's about realizing that the measure of a society is how it protects its people, especially when no one is watching.
Do you know what haunts me? It's not the crash. It's the idea that in a year from now someone will board another plane and all of this will be forgotten. That's why we must remember, not just in moments of mourning, but in moments of action. We remember by asking for transparency. We remember by demanding stricter oversight. We remember by pushing for legislation that puts lives before profits. And we remember by refusing to let their names fade. Their voices were silenced in one horrifying moment. Let ours rise in their place. Because if we stay silent, if we allow this to fade into just another crash, then we become part of the system that failed them. But if we speak, if we act, if we remember, then maybe, just maybe, something good can rise from all this grief.
Let's talk about fear. Not the fear that makes you check your seatbelt twice before takeoff. Not the fear that wakes you in the night from a bad dream. But the fear that settles in your chest, quiet, heavy, permanent, when you realize the world is not as safe as they told you. When I first stepped on a plane decades ago, I didn't know much about altitudes or turbulence. What I knew was trust. Trust in the pilot. Trust in the airline. Trust in the bright, smiling flight attendant who welcomed me on board. But now, after Air India Flight AI 171, I carry something else with me when I fly. It's not just luggage. It's not just headphones and books. It's the memory of a crash that should never have happened. It's the ache of 242 families left behind. And it's the knowledge that behind the polished ads and airline slogans, something is broken. And I know I'm not alone. There are people all over the world now whispering the same words, I will never fly, because how can you? How can you trust what betrayed so many? This isn't about being dramatic. This is about being honest, because until we face that fear, until we name it, hold it, and learn from it, we will keep walking in circles. We will keep writing apologies instead of preventing accidents. We will keep burying the innocent instead of fixing the guilty. You see, fear isn't weakness. Fear is a signal. Fear is your soul whispering, something's wrong, pay attention. And right now, our souls are screaming. It's not just about Air India. It's about every institution that grows too big to listen, too big to care, too focused on revenue and stockholders and image control, and not enough on human lives. What happened that day over Ahmedabad is now burned into the minds of millions, not just in India, but across the world, and with good reason. Because in every country, there's someone thinking, what if this is our airline next? What if it's our families tomorrow? When a plane falls from the sky, it brings down more than metal. It collapses confidence, it crushes assumptions, and it leaves a hole in the air that can't be filled with words. I've read the statements from Air India, from Boeing, from the aviation authorities, and do you know what's missing? Emotion. There are words like malfunction, investigation pending, we are cooperating with regulators, but where is the heart? Where is the trembling voice of a CEO standing before the victims' families saying, we failed you? You see, we're so good at being corporate, so good at legal language and PR damage control, but we are terrible at being human, and that's the root of the problem. Human lives reduced to press statements, tragedies reduced to statistics, and sorrow reduced to silence. I want to take a moment and speak to the survivors, or more accurately, the lone survivor, Vishwash. You are not just a miracle, you are now a messenger. You walk through fire and metal and fate for a reason, and I pray with all my heart that you find healing, that the world holds you gently, and that your voice never gets silenced by fear or pressure, because your story, what you saw, what you heard, what you felt in those moments, it matters. It matters more than any black box, more than any committee finding, because you carry the last beating heart of that flight. To those who lost someone on board, I say this, your grief is not invisible, your pain is not secondary to news cycles, and your stories will not be lost in the wind. You are the heartbeat of this movement. You are the reason we must keep asking, keep digging, keep demanding. And to those listening who have never experienced this kind of loss, let this be the moment you care. Let this be the moment you stop saying, it's not my problem, because the moment we stop caring is the moment it will be our turn. You see, change does not come when we are ready. It comes when we are ruined. It comes in the ashes. It comes in the screams. It comes in the silence left by those who are no longer here to speak. And in this silence, we must become their voices. We must speak not with anger, but with urgency, not with blame, but with intention. Because this was a warning written not in ink, but in smoke and fire, in torn metal and broken hearts, in the cries of a nation still trying to breathe, and we will not ignore it. I've often said, turn your wounds into wisdom, but there's a caveat to that truth. It only happens when we allow ourselves to truly feel the wound, to sit with it, to ask what it's trying to teach us. And right now, in the quiet aftermath of the Air India plane crash, India, no, the world is wounded. This wasn't just metal hitting Earth. This was a human failure that shook our global conscience. It shattered something sacred, our trust in the air above us. And I don't care how many years we've flown, how many runways we've built, how many wings we've watched lift into the sky. Trust, once broken, does not fly again so easily. People aren't just afraid to board a plane now. They're afraid of what the world is becoming. A place where corporate apologies come faster than real answers, where investigations are wrapped up with headlines, but families are left waiting with nothing but a folded flag and a formal letter. But let me tell you something. There is a difference between moving on and moving forward. Moving on is forgetting. Moving forward is remembering and choosing to rise anyway. So how do we move forward from this? We start by asking better questions. Not just what failed, but who allowed this failure to go unchecked. Not just was the pilot trained, but was the airline held accountable when corners were cut. Not just how do we compensate, but how do we prevent another tragedy? We have to look deeper than the debris, because truth doesn't lie in a single investigation. It lies in a system of complacency, a pattern of silence, and a habit of brushing off warnings until it's too late. If you want real change, it begins with 3 words. We demand better. Not we suggest, not we hope. We demand. We demand that airlines publish their safety records publicly. We demand that whistleblowers be protected, not punished. We demand that the people responsible for maintaining aircraft are treated with the respect and the resources they deserve, because you don't get safety from slogans. You get it from systems, from people who are awake, aware, and willing to speak up. And to those in power, I say this: do not mistake our mourning for passivity. Do not confuse grief with weakness. We may be heartbroken, but we are not helpless. Grief can be fuel, and right now it's fueling a fire that says never again. Do you know what history teaches us? That tragedy often precedes transformation, but only if people care enough to fight for it. The Titanic sank and we got maritime laws. Chernobyl exploded and we learned about human error in systems. 9/11 happened and aviation security was rewritten. So what will the legacy of Flight AI 171 be? Will it be just another footnote in aviation history, or will it be the moment India, no, humanity stood up and said, not on our watch. The choice is ours, and I want you to hear this loud and clear. The people on that flight were not statistics. They were teachers, students, mothers, fathers, engineers, nurses, babies. They were dreams, halfway realized. They were laughter, never to be heard again. They were lives. We must stop treating these crashes as isolated incidents. They are not random. They are symptoms of deeper issues that demand honest, brutal attention. When we allow cost-cutting to win over safety, when we let regulatory bodies be influenced by profit, when we treat warning signs as inconveniences, we are playing with lives. And the universe, my friends, will not keep giving us second chances. To the governments, to the aviation boards, to the CEOs, this is your reckoning. This is your moment to prove that the sky belongs to the people, not the powerful. Fix what is broken, not with words but with action, not with promises but with policy, not for public relations but for the public safety. And to every single person watching this, listening, feeling the heaviness in their chest, you have more power than you think. Ask questions, write letters, sign petitions, support truth tellers, stand with the grieving, and never ever allow silence to become the norm, because silence didn't just follow the crash, it caused it. And that's why I say, with every breath in my body, with every part of me that still believes in truth and justice, I will never fly the same again. Not with fear but with purpose, not with anger but with awareness, not with despair but with the demand that every flight, every crew member, every child on board gets the dignity of a safe return. In moments of global grief, we often wait for the world to change from the top down. We hope someone important will do something powerful, but I have learned over decades of listening, watching, and living that change never begins with the powerful. It begins with the aware. This tragedy, the crash of Air India Flight AI 171, is not just India's pain. It's not just aviation shame. It is our collective mirror. And what we see in that mirror is uncomfortable. We see how easily safety can be traded for speed, how quietly warnings can be buried beneath bureaucracy, how quickly grief can be ignored once the headlines fade. But we also see something else. We see the rise of a new kind of awareness. People aren't just watching now, they are witnessing. They are asking, how did this happen? Could it have been me? What am I not being told? And that awareness, if nurtured, becomes power. Because the truth is, we don't need more speeches. We need more action. We don't need more memorials. We need reform. We don't need to fear flying. We need to fix flying. Let's look beyond the surface. Let's question the silence after the press conferences. Let's investigate the invisible machinery, the politics, the profit models, the regulatory gaps that allowed this to happen. Because here's what nobody wants to say out loud. It was avoidable. If maintenance protocols had been followed with religious discipline, if reported issues had been escalated without hesitation, if crews were supported, trained, and respected without compromise, this flight would have landed. And that reality is heavy. It should be. It must be. There's a mother who still sets 2 plates at dinner, forgetting her son won't walk through the door. There's a husband who keeps his wife's last voicemail saved just to hear her laugh. There's a school with an empty seat in the front row because their brightest child didn't make it back from vacation. These stories are real, these losses are permanent, and these voices, though now silent, must echo in our actions. This isn't just about airplanes. It's about what kind of world we're building. A world where life is honored, or one where it's outsourced for convenience. A world where safety is sacred, or one where it's sold off for speed. And you, yes you, watching this, listening, feeling this, you are not powerless. You can speak, you can share, you can question, you can vote, you can hold systems accountable. Because remember, the sky doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to people, to the babies who believe it's magic, to the grandparents who still look up in wonder, to the doctors, students, artists, teachers who fly to change lives. They deserve to arrive alive. Let's reimagine what flying means. Not just a way to get from A to B, but a journey we trust, a moment we share, a promise that the people we love will return. Let's demand that airlines stop acting like empires and start acting like caretakers. Let's demand that investigations lead to transformation, not just temporary outrage. Let's demand that behind every safety check, every bolt, every takeoff, there is a culture of care so deep, so committed, so relentless that the idea of another crash becomes unthinkable. And yes, let's say the words that have been sitting heavy in our throats. I'm scared to fly, not to be dramatic, not to be irrational, but because we've seen what happens when vigilance is lost. Let's not be told what's safe, let's be shown. And finally, to those lost on that flight, we didn't know your names before, but now we carry them in our questions, in our protests, in our policies, in our prayers. We may never know your last thoughts, but we will make sure the world learns from your last flight. You are not forgotten, you are fuel, you are fire, you are the reason we rise. So I leave you with this: don't just mourn, mobilize, don't just cry, commit. Don't just remember the tragedy, rebuild the system that caused it. Because the next time someone says, I will never fly again, we want the reason to be joy, not fear. We want people to say, I will never fly again, without knowing, truly knowing that someone cared enough to change everything. Let that be the legacy of AI 17.